Hello everyone, Jay Warden here and welcome to my recap and review of the episode Coming of Age. A great episode which actually treats Wesley well and sets us up for a future narrative arc. Don't forget those spoilers, otherwise please enjoy. The Enterprise is at Relva 7 where Wesley is going to take his final exams for Starfleet Academy. As he makes his way to the transporter room, he catches up with his dejected looking friend called Jake, who sadly didn't make the grade for his academy exam before beaming down to the planet. Also on Relva is an old friend of Picard's, Admiral Gregory Quinn, who was requested to come on board for a little chat. Picard warmly welcomes him and makes introductions, while Quinn introduces Commander Remick to them before tersely saying he's here on official business and needs to speak to Picard alone. In the ready room, Quinn explains that Remick is from the Inspector General's office and will be conducting a full investigation of the Enterprise, as he believes there may be something very wrong on the ship. Picard of course wants to know why, but Quinn won't say anything and instead gives Remick his marching orders, who in turn makes us suspect that he might be a bit of a twat. On the surface, Wesley meets his competition in the form of a hot young lady called Oleana, a hot young Vulcan called Tashanik, and a hot young Benzype called Mordok. After they have a brief ice-breaking session, the officer in charge, Lieutenant Chang, walks in and welcomes them all. Though they're all top candidates that could easily qualify for entry into the academy, only one candidate will be chosen today, and that they must expect the unexpected before leaving them to get on with their tests. Meanwhile on the ship, Remick is hovering about making notes and generally being annoying, so Riker goes to Picard and demands to know what's going on. But Picard is as much in the dark as Riker is, and is just as clearly frustrated, so he tells Riker to simply put up with it and cooperate. As he leaves, Remick says he wants to talk to Riker now, but despite being told to cooperate, tells Remick to fuck off and that he'll talk to him when it doesn't interfere with his duties. Meanwhile, Wesley and the other candidates finish their first round of tests and are given an hour's break. Oleana is a little frustrated and laments how easy it seems to be for Wesley and the others, and though Wesley says it's not that easy, Oleana comments that it's a good thing he's cute because otherwise he'd be really obnoxious. Clearly she hasn't seen much of season 1. Riker meanwhile apologises to Picard for his earlier frustrations and tells Remick he's now ready to have their little chat, and it's here we're finally introduced to the infamous Riker manoeuvre. Remick starts immediately quizzing him on the captain's logs, and Riker realises that this investigation is actually about Picard. He gets a bit upset at this implication, but Remick immediately shuts him down and demands he cooperate, suggesting that he might be trying to cover up something if he doesn't. We then get a brief montage of Remick quizzing Laforge and Troy about Picard's actions from when the ship got sent to the edge of the universe by that twat Kaczynski, or his mental lapses like that time when Damon Bock messed with his head on the Stargazer, each time acting like a smug twat himself when he finally gets the answer he wants. In an empty holodeck, Wesley is having a good old brood when Worf walks in. Realising he may be disturbing Wesley, he says he'll leave him in peace, but Wesley says he wouldn't mind some company right now, and, as we all know, Worf is known for his legendary social skills. Wesley explains that he's concerned about the upcoming psych tests where he must face his deepest fear and live through it. So Worf gives him a little pep talk and says that there's little point in worrying about something you can't change, and then shares his own experience of the psych test. On the bridge, Yar reports an unauthorised launch of a shuttlecraft, and it seems the dejected team from earlier, Jake, has decided that he can't face his father after failing his Starfleet exams, and so wants to go sign up on a freighter to run away from his problems. But his inexperience leads to a malfunction in the shuttle's engines, and he goes out of control, heading towards the planet where he'll burn up and die. Remick, however, continues to be in everyone's face, so Picard tells him in no uncertain terms to get the fuck out of his way or be removed from the bridge. With the shuttle less than a minute away from burning up, Picard calmly tells Jake to do exactly what he says, and gives him some instructions. A few tense moments later, Picard gives the order and Jake pulls up as hard as he can, causing the shuttle to bounce off the atmosphere safely. Everyone cheers and even Remick is impressed, but then immediately questions why Picard would allow a child access to a shuttle, and if his training included any discipline. Picard again calmly explains that sometimes young people do dumb things and that Riker will be sure to give Jake a good talking to later about his behaviour. Remick then goes back to his montage of quizzing the crew about Picard, this time with Data, Worf, and even asks Dr. Beverly about her feelings serving with a man responsible for her husband's death, but it seems poor Yar doesn't even get a turn, even though she's the chief of security and should be involved in security matters, so as usual is completely ignored. Finally he goes to Picard directly, but he's had enough of all this bollocks and so goes directly to Quinn and demands once and for all some answers about what this is all about. So Quinn asks Remick to come down to give his final report and tells Picard he regrets the strain this has put on their friendship, but unfortunately it's been necessary. Meanwhile, Wesley and the other candidates are being tested again and it seems Mordok's having some trouble with it. But with some help and encouragement from Wesley, he manages to complete the test first before everyone else. Chang comes in and congratulates him, but Mordok feels it was undeserved because of Wesley's help. Chang already knows this though and simply says it was an interesting choice on Wesley's part. He then gives them all an hour to prepare for their final trial, the psych test. Remick arrives at Quinn's quarters and delivers his report, regretting that he could find nothing wrong with the ship or the crew at all, and even expresses to Picard his desire to serve on the ship once his current tour of duty is up, which doesn't seem to fill Picard with any enthusiasm, before leaving them to talk in private. Quinn tells Picard not to judge Remick too harshly and that he's only doing his job, but Picard says it's not him he's judging. Quinn goes on to explain that there was never anything wrong with the ship, but there's definitely something wrong in the Federation, and that someone or something is trying to destroy it from within, and he needed to be sure that Picard wasn't in on this supposed conspiracy. Though he can't give any specifics right now because too many people are involved, he essentially needs people he can trust in important positions if he's going to fight this subversion, and wants to promote Picard to Admiral and put him in charge of Starfleet Academy. Picard is rather taken aback by this offer and says he needs to think on it first, but Quinn says he needs an answer ASAP. Back on the planet, Wesley's preparing to face his psych test. Murdoch has just finished his test and is shaking like a leaf and clearly disturbed by what he just went through, which I'm sure Wesley finds very reassuring. He enters a barren looking room and waits nervously for it to start when suddenly he hears an explosion outside. As he runs in to see what's going on, it seems some sort of disaster has taken place in one of the labs, and 2 men are trapped inside with the computer warning the room will be sealed off completely in 60 seconds. With the clock ticking, Wesley does his best to save them, but only has enough time to save one of the men, so goes for the injured man first while the non-injured man just screams in fear, unwilling to save himself despite Wesley's best efforts, and eventually the room seals him inside. Chang then arrives, calms Wesley down and tells him this was part of his psych test, because their evaluations of him said that his greatest fear was that he wouldn't be able to make the terrible choice of who lives and who dies, as a result of his father's death, which was the direct result of a choice Picard made all those years ago. Later on, Chang expresses his pride in how well all the candidates have done, but there can only be one choice and it's Murdoch who wins today, just beating Wesley. Murdoch doesn't think he deserves it because of Wesley's help on his test earlier, but Chang explains it wasn't just because of that and that he does indeed deserve it. In the conference room, Wesley is brooding again when Picard walks in all dressed up for a dinner. Wesley is upset because he didn't get into the academy, feeling he let everyone down, but Picard says that's bullshit because he tries his best, will learn from the experience and test again next year, which will result in an even better performance, before letting him in on a little secret that even he failed the first time, reassuring Wesley that everything will probably be alright in the end. Finally, in the transporter room, Picard wishes Quinn farewell after having turned down his offer, but tells him to let him know if he needs any help in the future before sending the Enterprise off to its next mission. Okay, this was a good episode, and a very different beast compared to everything that's come before, because this is the first TNG episode that attempts what modern TV shows take for granted these days, a serialized narrative. And it's also our first completely separated A-plot, B-plot script that has nothing to do with each other. So let's get stuck in, and I'll talk about the Wesley stuff first. I quite liked it, much more than I expected to, and I thought it really helped to humanise Wesley a bit more, given he's pretty much been treated as this infallible wonder child most of the time. He faces tough competition from other very smart people and ends up actually failing to get into the academy, only just getting beaten out by Murdoch. Although some might point out that it's only because Wesley was too kind, losing valuable time and points by helping Murdoch, Lieutenant Chang specifically says it wasn't only this that factored into Murdoch being chosen over Wesley, so really even if he hadn't helped, Wesley would have still failed, and I like that. This is followed up quite nicely at the end where Wesley is brooding in the conference room and Picard comes in and gives him a bit of a pep talk, which is a really nice little character moment for both of them and even gives us a little more insight into Picard. But the standout moment for me here is when Wesley is dealing with his psych test. The show has touched briefly before on the backstory behind Wesley's father, but all we really know at this point is that Picard was the one who brought his father's body back home to them. Here though we learn that whatever happened back then, Picard was forced to make a choice on who to save, with that choice directly resulting in the death of Wesley's father, and as a result Wesley fears having to make such a choice himself. You could argue that most of us would probably fear this kind of life and death choice, and that's true. But here it's very relevant because this must be in Wesley's mind far more than it would be for the rest of us given what happened to his father, and I like that. It actually adds some depth to Wesley beyond his usual wonder child status, and I really wish the show had done more stuff like this for his character. Even better is we get a bonus moment with Worf. What a joy to finally see some characterization for Worf beyond "I'm a Klingon." And it's a good moment too because it helps to humanise Worf a little by him letting Wesley know his own fears and how he has to live with it every day. I've very little to say about the other young candidates Wesley is competing against. The Vulcan Tashanak is just there, and though Oleana gets a few moments, she's nothing special. Murdoch though gets the most characterisation here, and he strikes up a nice little friendship with Wesley, as well as showing us a new species we've not seen before that has this cool little breathing apparatus on them. There was also a cheesy little moment where Wesley bumps into some huge chap who gets quite aggressive, so Wesley responds in kind. It's kind of funny seeing Wesley try to be macho to someone twice his size, but it turns out this was just another little test to see how the candidates responded to different cultures. Though I have to question this particular species because apparently they see politeness and courtesy as an insult, so I had trouble believing this guy would get along very well with his fellow Starfleet officers where diplomacy and courtesy are a central part of Starfleet and the Federation. As for the other plot with the investigation into Picard, this too was quite good. As I mentioned, this is the first time TNG has attempted any real kind of serialized narrative, and I appreciated it so much. The closest we've ever come to this is with Q and brief mentions of their Farpoint encounter in Hide and Q, but here we get callbacks and references to several previous episodes, which is very welcome in establishing the continuity of the series and helps sell the depth of Remek's investigation into Picard's previous actions. Not only that, but the episode is a direct setup for the penultimate Season 1 episode, Conspiracy, which is still a few episodes away, but something I'm quite looking forward to reviewing. It's also refreshing to see some interpersonal conflict on a show that is famous for having minimal interpersonal conflict, something Gene Roddenberry was very adamant about because we were supposedly so much more civilized as a race by this point in time, which is a lovely humanist concept, but a terrible one for any writer seeking to add drama. As a result, this often forces the writers to use external threats or mind-altering forces to add any tension or conflict between our characters. Remek, though, is a suitable douchebag to create conflict here, and though he steps a little too far here and there into being an obstructive twat, notably when getting in Picard's face when he's trying to save the shuttlecraft, he does a good job of giving us someone who pushes everyone's buttons and making us dislike him. But there are also small moments of humanizing this guy, like again with the aforementioned shuttle crisis, he's just as happy and cheering like everyone else when Picard successfully saves young Jake from incinerating himself, and towards the end when he expresses his desire to serve under Picard because at the end of the day he's just a Starfleet officer like the rest of them and he's only doing his duty. So I kind of felt sorry for him when, after expressing his desire to serve on the Enterprise after his current assignment is over, Picard just blanks him with a "I don't think so" face. There's less to say about Admiral Quinn, but I kinda wish this was the guy we saw in the episode Too Short a Season, for an old admiral called in to deal with a mess he created decades ago instead of a young guy in terrible old age makeup. The episode tries to establish that Picard and Quinn have a long history and friendship together, but I didn't really get that feeling from their scenes together. Sure, Quinn for the most part is keeping Picard at arm's length due to his investigation, and though he's friendly enough once Remek reports he can find nothing wrong, I just felt that there wasn't that much chemistry between them. His main purpose here though is obviously to lay the seeds that something is very wrong at the heart of the Federation, and that will bear fruit in a few episodes' time. The last thing to really comment on here is the stuff with Jake Kurland. It's probably the weakest aspect of the episode. We've never seen him before, and we never see him again, but is apparently friends with Wesley. I felt if he had been established as a character a couple of times before this, I would have cared a bit more about his situation, but as it stands he's merely used to give us a little dramatic excitement and show how awesome Picard can be under pressure when he steals a shuttle because he wants to run away from his problems and he's apparently quite inept at piloting a shuttle. Picard gives him a quick pep talk at the end, but it's not nearly as impactful as his talk with Wesley. So yes, a very good episode I think, and it feels like Season 1 is genuinely starting to improve in the quality of its writing and characterization, certainly compared to the first half of the season anyway, and it's very welcome. Next time, stop the press, it's a Worf episode as he gets to meet some fellow Klingons and gives us the first of many situations where Worf is forced to choose between the Federation and the Klingons, in the episode Heart of Glory. Please feel free to leave any comments or feedback, and if you liked this episode then please do like, subscribe and share. This has been Jay Warden, signing off.